Welcome to Redacted Opinions, unfiltered, raw, and authentic. The opinions expressed on this show are those of the hosts alone. And now, let's get on with the show.
Hello and welcome to Redacted Opinions, raw and unfiltered. I'm Luciano Sordoni, your host, and with me, Brian Clayman, my wingman. We have a special guest today to talk about a very difficult subject, which we hopefully can discuss with some levity, although it's difficult once you hear what the topic is. We've all seen the headlines across Canada. We're all watching a brutal, devastating string of line of duty deaths involving cops, medics, firefighters, people who choose to wear the uniform and unfortunately don't make it home. The public sees the flashing lights, the media, the press, and the massive funerals. But on Redacted Opinions, we want to get behind the scenes. So tonight, we're going to try and pull back the curtain a little on what happens when the cameras are turned off. Because when something like this happens, the tragedy doesn't stop with the media coverage. It really starts to impact the family and the extended family, the police and the organization. It rattles the dispatchers who took the call, civilian staff are affected, supervisors have to keep the wheels turning while their people are quietly breaking down. All these things have to continue to happen in the midst of this type of tragedy. So we're asking the uncomfortable question, when the worst happens, does the system work? Are we prepared? Do we have the resources to help our frontline responders with the specific grief that they deal with when something tragic happens? And when an entire organization is drowning in that grief, who is helping the chief? Our guest today has been in that role. Part of the reason why we brought him on is because he's seen it, he's done it, and wanted to uncover what goes on in the chief's mind, a leader's mind at a time when his people are suffering, the media wants details, and he's pushed out there to stand tall, be respectful, stoic, as if he doesn't have feelings. And we all know that he does. Every person does. So this isn't about political correctness. This is about survival, raw trauma, and the systemic cracks we pretend aren't there. So Brian, let's bring in someone who actually knows about this issue and can speak to it on this episode.
Are you talking about me?
Yeah, I'm talking about you, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah. Listen, I want to introduce our special guest, Jeff McGuire, and just give a little bit of his background. I think it's important. Jeff is a respected Canadian policing leader with more than 4 decades, because he's old. He began his career with Toronto Police Service in 1977 and served in numerous operational, investigative, and senior leadership positions. When he left the service in 2012, he was serving as the acting deputy chief of specialized operations with responsibility for 19 specialized units, more than 2,300 employees, and an operating budget of approximately $232 million. Jeff subsequently served for more than 5 years, chief of police of the Niagara Regional Police Service, and from 2018 to 24 as the executive director of the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police. He's a graduate of the FBI National Academy and holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Justice Studies from the University of Guelph. In recognition of his contributions in policing and public safety, he was appointed Officer of the Order of Merit of Police Forces, which is quite a prestigious nation to get. Jeff currently serves as Vice President of the Canada 911 Ride Foundation and is a senior advisor with TNT Justice Consultants. He continues to contribute his extensive experience to discussions concerning policing, organizational leadership, officer wellness, and public safety. Jeff, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad you used the short version of my resume to get started. Thanks for the introduction, Brian.
Thank you, Jeff. Listen, I just want to start off by asking you, unless you've lived under a stone, it has been a crazy 5-month period for the emergency service community. We've had, I believe, 8 or 9 emergency service first responders, most of them police, I think 7 police officers and 2 paramedics who died in the line of duty, 4 just the other day. 1 officer was killed. He was going to the training academy. He was a recruit. His partner was seriously injured, and God willing, he survives. And we had 2 paramedics the same day lost their lives. So, Jeff, can you just comment from your perspective what's happening, how you think people are receiving this in the policing community?
Again, thanks, Brian, for the introduction, and both of you, thanks for having me on today. Obviously, a very difficult and challenging topic, but not one, again, unfortunately, that I and so many of my colleagues are unfamiliar with living through and speaking about. I think the one thing that we can draw, first of all, we open this with our condolences to all of those families that have been impacted by that and all of the colleagues as well. It's a huge challenge to the officers that work side by side, but let's not forget that, as you mentioned, their fathers and their brothers and their sisters and sons and daughters, long before they become police officers, one of the lines I've often used is that we were humans before we became cops. Same for all first responders. So if we're talking about just recently in the past, probably about 8 weeks, Ryan, you touched on the numbers. I think the one thing that we need to be a little bit of comfort in, which sounds strange, but a little bit of comfort because I get friends and neighbors asking me about, wow, what a trend. How is this? And the reality of this is most of those incidents that we've experienced recently, they're not connected to each other in any kind of a way that somebody set out to do all these things as a collective group. If you understand what I mean, or if I'm being clear, it's not like it's a terrorist action, although there may be some touch in some of them. The most recent that we think of, the officers in Durham, these poor young kids. I say that I'm old enough. I'm 27 years old. And I've spoken to people at Durham Region. Absolutely wonderful human being. And on his way to start his goal in life to be a police officer, and tragically lost their life in a motor vehicle collision. The impact is horrendous to everyone and the families as well. But the point I wanted to make is I've had some neighbors, as I said, ask. It's not like it's like we have to look at it as a trend or a group of people coming after us per se. They are individually in some of these cases. The others are just a significant number of tragedies, and their sole connection is the uniform and the oath that people have sworn and the public service that they set out to do that morning when they left their homes. Another tie-in when I talk about the Durham piece, if you take a look at, as we know, we've talked, Brian, about the horrific incident out in New Brunswick and PEI with the paramedics. Just not to minimize things, but it's a horrific triple fatality motor vehicle collision. We don't know, and nor would we comment on how or why it occurred. That'll come out in the investigation, but it did cost the lives of 2 public servants. And as we know, in that case, it's a family of public servants as well on small scale. We've seen trends like this, not necessarily trends, let's call them groupings of these horrific events in the past. I recall very clearly there was one back in the early 80s when I first started working at 14 Division. And I'd gone camping with my uncle. We went into Algonquin Park for 4 days and came out, and there was nothing in the newspapers but the 4 police officers in Ontario that had been murdered during that 4-day time period. And that really punched me in the head as a young kid who spent my whole life just wanting to do that job. I actually took the time to write a letter to the editor of the Toronto Sun. I don't know if you recall, where they used to have at the bottom of the editorial page, and there was always one letter of the day, little tiny blurb. And lo and behold, they picked mine. And keep in mind, I was a 4 or 5-year-old uniformed police officer. And I spoke out about the horror and just what I told you, going into camp, coming out 4 days later, 4 murders, etc. I made some comments then about the death penalty and my thoughts at that time when I was younger, which some of it may have changed over time. But that's the kind of impact we get. But we just have to get up every day like these cops and paramedics and fire do, and they put the uniform on, out the door.
Luke, let me just run this first one and then I'll turn it over to you. Jeff, can you just walk us through the immediate impact? You're the chief, you're sitting at your desk, you get a phone call, the nightmare is occurring, okay? What's it like? What happens? What do you think? What do you do?
Well, interestingly, I've been on all sides of that equation. So I certainly will speak to it as a chief and a leader. But I spent 10 years as a homicide investigator in Toronto. It was a big part of my career in Toronto. And I was the guy that got woke up at 3 a.m. for a call for a homicide. And with the duty desk, it's nothing abnormal. You're on call, you get a call in the middle of the night, you get up, you make some notes. I will never forget the call that I got. It was for the murder of Billy Hancock in Toronto, a young cop that was stabbed and murdered. 4 years earlier, I'd been at 55 Division. I worked with Bill Hancock. He was on my platoon in uniform there when I was a sergeant. And now here I am taking some notes, getting dressed, and getting my car to go out with the team, investigate the murder of a police officer that I knew. So that's the impact. From the chief's perspective as well, I've called chiefs as a duties inspector to inform them of, hey, chief, sorry to wake you, but I got to tell you about this call. And I've been through that. My time when I was in Niagara, looking back, I was the chief of police there for 5 years. And luckily, I did not have officers murdered, but I had an officer that was, Brian, you will know, we honored an officer with the Canada 911 ride that had been called to a home with a person going through a mental episode. As the 2 officers went through the front door of the house to help his elderly parents, this 50-year-old person blew the house up with gasoline. And those 2 officers were lucky to have survived and had life-altering injuries to this day. So as a chief, I had to deal with that and deal with families. I experienced the whole gamut. And I describe it as People think about in all murders, but we're talking tonight about the killings of frontline people. It's a spider web effect or the shattering of a mirror kind of a thing where people don't really realize sometimes that it's not just B platoon at that station that gets impacted and his wife and kids. It's the hockey team he coached. As we've seen the impact in Mark Canizotto, the work that he did in Oakville with hockey, the teams that are impacted, the schools, the neighbors, the kids in the class. It just goes on and on. So it's not just us. It's that shattered impact that one split second of horrendous trauma can impact so many people.
If I could just add on to that, Brian, because I don't think people really appreciate how tight that brotherhood, sisterhood can be amongst officers as a second family, if you want to use that. When an event happens like that, I know, you guys know, there's a lot of discussions being had amongst those platoons, immediate platoon affected, but the entire organization, there's people asking themselves, am I doing the right job? Am I in the right job? Am I cut out for this? That could have been me. Should I have been there? Could I have been there? All those questions start to rattle through people's brains. So my question relating to how it really spiderwebs, as the guy in charge, the chief, how do you manage that? What kind of resources do you have to help those officers get through it?
That's a great question. I've talked a lot about this in my time with the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police. After my time as chief, I got to connect with chiefs right across the province and work with them for over 6 years. And the thing that we have to remember as well, and I mentioned this already, is that we, and when I say we, we're talking about chiefs now, or senior command, people running the services at the management level, they're humans as well. We're humans first, right? We've been through that, but we talk about, you've seen what you've seen recently when you see these press conferences, right? You see the chiefs standing up to microphones. Myron Demke, the chief of Toronto Police Service, we've all in the Greater Toronto area, you've seen him talk on TV probably 5 times a week for the last however long he's been in place, 4 or 5 years now. But when these things happen, we get to see a human being standing there being the chief, but with his voice cracking. And all of us with feeling the emotions in ourselves, thinking that poor guy has to stand there and do that. But that's leadership. And that's when they have to get up and speak on behalf of all the people that are still answering radio calls as this is happening, as the chief is at the podium. The cops and the paramedics didn't go home. They just kept going with this in the back of their mind on top of all the other luggage that they have. From a chief and a senior management perspective, we've advocated quite a bit to work together with the chiefs to make sure they take care of themselves as well. It's all very important to make sure your people are well, make sure things are running smooth, make sure they got the resource and the equipment. But it's a pretty lonely job at times, I can tell you. I'm not complaining. We all signed up for it. But at the end of the day, you're the chief and you're the last guy there. And you, before that press conference, you know where he just came from, right? Came from the hospital. He probably met with the family and children. He's met with the immediate colleagues and people that were there. And now he's got to talk to the public and he's got to talk to the board and the mayor and answer questions. So it is an incredibly challenging, but the men and women that take on these command positions, they know that's their role and they know that they have to take care of themselves, but they have to take care of their people and make sure that they're properly cared for.
Sorry, Brian.
Go ahead.
One more question.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
You made an interesting point. You have to deal with the public first. And then secondly, you said it still continues, right? It's not a private company where something tragic happens. Hey, we're closing up early today. We're going home. The system needs to continue to function. But my question is, you talked about dealing with the public. And you know that right now, I'd say that police relations are less than ideal with the public. I would say thanks largely to the media stirring the pot. But that aside, how has that changed things for chiefs in that role now, where you've got an officer who's been targeted or whatever it is, he's dead, unfortunately, in our examples today, and you're going to have this public undertow of people saying, well, to be honest, some people say, hey, he deserved it, right? He's a copper, that kind of thing. Do you think it's changed how you guys approach those types of communications with the public now?
I think it absolutely has. And I think one thing you touched on there is, or I think you're getting close to touch on it, it's the immediacy of media. It's the social media. I say this every day. I look at something, even just simple stuff. I can look at my phone now and I can see somebody nearby. I'm out in the courses right now and people are driving to their cottage and somebody's going to post a picture of a car in a ditch upside down. And that's 15 seconds in. People at home, somebody's going to pick that up. Somebody else 20 cars back is driving the cottage and say, that's my friend. The same thing happens here. The fact that a police officer was shot, if we use the Toronto incident recently with Mark Canizotto, I could go to social media within, I got woken up at home. I have family that work still in policing. I have kids and in-law, son-in-law that actually works in the same unit with Mark Canizotto. And so at 7:30 in the morning, I get woken up by my family saying, Dad, somebody's been shot, one of the teams. And then way down through the day, I'm picking things up on social media of people speculating already what's happened, possibly before people have even got to the family. So that is a part that chiefs and command officers now in the larger services, almost every service in Ontario has media relations professionals embedded right with them. And those are the people that take care of those things to make sure the chief is prepped and knows what has to happen next, not what to say. The chief is going to say what they need to say. So it has absolutely changed over time. I would suggest to you that back in the early 80s, an incident like that would have occurred in the early 80s, and there were no cell phones buzzing around. There was no social media. Everything happened. And good reporters might show up at the hospital and learn something, but this stuff didn't hit the news for hours. Now it hits the moment it happens. And it has to be dealt with, and the chiefs receive training on that, but it's a part of their human makeup that they have to develop very quickly. It can have a toll on them too, because it's so simple to slip and say something quickly that's out there and it's too late. But I think for the most part, they do a pretty darn good job.
To build on that with the recent Montreal shooting, that my sister lives in Montreal. She lives in a neighborhood where, and I can't believe the video that was floating around, like the raw, dirty, floating around seconds after, with victims lying in a pool of blood. And families are seeing this stuff. By the time you see the 6 o'clock news, it's sanitized, but it's on YouTube forever. And it's a whole new world that we're living with. Listen, just want to ask you, are there enough supports out there? A lot of people are impacted. Leadership is impacted, rank and file is impacted, families, community. Can you talk about the supports available?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the simple answer is no, there are not, because it would be silly to say that there are enough, because, and I don't say that in a negative way, because we are a long ways ahead of where we were. I've been around long enough now that it's, like you said, it was 49 years ago this month that I was sworn in as a cadet. Back then, and part of the, because I do some work with a company, I don't know if I'm allowed to say their name. I've been doing some consulting work with a company called Mental Fitness IQ. So it's MFIQ, which is a Canadian company, app-based program to help develop and build resilience among people. My role is to get them to the right people in the first responder piece of the pie, but it's built for humans. So, there's all kinds of things like this. This is to do that kind of a help on the mental health piece, as well as help change the culture of the organization and such. But when you talk about, one of the examples I use when I'm talking with that group is, and this is a true story, when I was a young cop back in the very early 80s, 81, 82, and I can remember a staff sergeant saying to me one day, I think I had been at some horrific motor vehicle fatality, collision kind of thing. And after 7 hours of working away and we're cleaning up, and the staff sergeant looking at me saying, I hope you got another shirt in your locker, because you can't go back out in the road with all that blood on you. That was the trauma care that I received at that time. That was it. There was no, how are you feeling? And I'm not being critical at the time, because that's what the world, I am so happy now in the progress that has been made over now 45 years, particularly in the last 10 years. I think a ton of progress has been made. There is a lot of help for people. But the bottom line is, we have to remember that we've seen the statistics. I don't have the numbers before me, but you'll see things where they say a first line responder will see X number of traumatic incidents in their lifetime, and the average human will see 6. And the ones that we see will be in the 700 or 800s, if I recall, depending on who's quoting the number, but lots. The answer is lots. No matter how much we have, there's always still that baggage that the front line has to carry. But I think we're in a far better place now. And when we talk about the families as well, the kids and the people in schools, we have victim services that are fantastic people. A large part of them are volunteers, but work with police services who, in the middle of the night, they can get the call as soon as we do. And they'll come out and assist the family and make sure they get to the resources they need, or get some counseling. And it could be as simple as somebody's got to drive the kids to school in the morning. They work out things like that. The long-term stuff, the mental health, every police service in Ontario, I'm confident, is doing much better than they were, but we will never be good enough. And even saying it like that, I don't feel fair saying it like that, because they're really trying. And there's a lot of groups also, as you will know, the boots on the ground, a lot of them association driven, but have brought in experts who make help available. People like Canada 911, like we're long after the fact, but we do a lot to try and comfort and support the families that are left behind from this shattered things. There's soul, right? The survivors of law enforcement who are actually the spouses or partners of members who have been murdered and killed 15 years or more than that, probably 20 years now. They've formed a formal organization where they can at least have people to talk to. And so short answer is no, we're not there. We're way, way far down the highway than we were a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. It certainly has gotten better, and I think they're on the right way. Just moving along, cognizant of time, we have a couple more questions for you, Jeff. And this one I think is a difficult one because we've talked about what happens at the time. You know, the officers passed on, you're dealing with the family, you're dealing with your organization, you're dealing with the public. But at some point, that debrief has to inevitably occur. And that debrief can be really good in the sense that they did everything right. Unfortunately, things went south. What can we do better next time? Or it could be the other side of the coin where it's like, we really screwed up and now we got to hold somebody accountable. We got to call people out. That's got to be a very difficult message to bring to your team, to your organization. How do you deal with that as the leader?
Yeah, very good point. And one of the first things to keep in mind in Ontario with the Special Investigations Unit, anytime an event like this occurs, the Special Investigation Unit invokes their mandate. For those who might be watching this, don't know, they're a government agency, but they're independent of the government. They're called in to investigate any time police officers involved in what could be a criminal offense or resulting in a level of serious injury. And there's all kinds of legal definitions of serious injury we don't need to get into here. But once they're called out, then the police service has the obligation to investigate the murder. And again, if we take the instance of a police officer being shot, and then the chief is in a position where they have to make sure that their homicide squad, or if he or she chooses to turn it over to an independent police service, that murder has to be investigated in the event it goes to criminal proceedings. So there's that split to start with, but then it does carry on. It's a challenge because let's talk about what you mentioned about the debrief at the end of the day kind of thing. Things, no matter which case, we could pick any one of these, and I don't think there's any value in picking one in particular, but each of these will be debriefed. It can be the one on the north, so the officer was hit by the vehicle driven by the guy. It can be Mark Canizzato, who was shot during a search warrant. The one in Montreal, how did they respond? They can go through that, and it can be difficult and challenging, and there can be criticisms at the end, but they have to be learning points, not criticisms, unless they're, and I don't see this ever, unless it was pure negligence. That's not the case. These officers are responding to calls for service. They can do their side as perfect as possible, but the other side is always a non-negotiable unknown. No matter how much intelligence, no matter how well you prepare, if it's an apartment we're going into, we could have been into an exact apartment like that 27 times. And when we talk about these tactical guys, as you know, if they're not crashing through doors, doing these high-risk warrants to get between evil and the rest of us, they're practicing. Yeah. That's their full time. But that can't guarantee what happens every time. So that you're absolutely essential. And they're generally not looking for guilt. It's not the goal. The plan is to look exactly as you worded. What did we do? Have we done things right? Have we trained our people properly? Have we provided them the proper equipment? Have we let them down that way? We have to fix this for the future.
Jeff, I want to talk a second about the police funeral. I've been to a few too many, but I had the honor of representing the Canada 911 Ride Foundation at Mark's funeral just a week or so ago. And you were there as a former chief. It is amazing. Everyone has seen them on TV. It is amazing to see the amount of people that are there, both from the community and also the policing community. And not just from Toronto and not just from Ontario, but throughout North America. What is the significance of that type of a event? It's a big holiday, but what else is happening?
Yeah, great question. And until you live it, you don't really get. I can try and share as much, and we do. And I think people understand, but you don't get it the same way. And I'm not saying that to be critical. I can remember the first Toronto police officer that was murdered after I joined the job in 1977. And I believe it was 1978. I was a cadet, and his name was Constable Snedden, and it occurred in Etobicoke. I remember that to this day. I was working inside the police station at one down on Strachan Avenue as an 18-year-old cadet, and I was just doing license checks for people, but it was all going on and listening to it on the radio. I actually drove by, I lived on Burnhamthorpe Road at the time at my parents' house, and I actually drove by the scene on my way home. So that never forgets. I've probably been to 40 or 50 funerals since that time. I've been to some in the United States. I've been right across Canada. I try not to miss any. I saw you, Brian, at Mark Mazzotto's funeral. And in fact, I will say that I was very proud to be the chief of police in Niagara Region, but I actually went to the Toronto Police funeral in my retired Toronto Police uniform and marched with the Toronto crew, because to me, that's been the biggest base of my career. I've worn my uniform twice, and you know them both. It was for Mark Mazzotto and for Andrew Hahn. I wore my Toronto uniform and marched with the Toronto Command. And I've been there with my own kids. Like I told you, they're tops, some of them, and my grandkids. It's just hard to explain. You have to be there. You feel that it's important to be there. It drives home for you the importance of what you do. It helps you reflect on your oath. It helps you get up the next morning. I think it helps them get up the next day, the next shift, and go back to work and not get overwhelmed with the, hey, that could have been me, although that's not something to ignore, but to recognize that, yes, this may be one of the risks, but I want to be here because one of the greatest comments, in my view, at Mark Mazzotto's funeral was his team leader when he was on the stage. And I think his point was clear to the bad guys. He says, if you think you've hurt us, you're wrong. You've simply made us stronger. We're a team that are still, we're here. Some people might think that's corny or hokey, but I can tell you 15,000 people in uniform inside that room didn't think it was hokey or corny, because it's the absolute truth. We all know we got to get up the next day. We got to go back to work. I also had the honor of being the master of ceremonies for the funeral of Sergeant Ryan Russell, 20 years ago or more. Now, I think it was about sergeant who was run over by a mentally ill person on a snowplow. And that was one of the biggest funerals at the time. I was on stage and got to speak throughout that. It's just something that you will never forget. And I'm not making this sound heroic. It's something I would have been just as happy sitting in the audience. But Chief Blair asked me if I would take the lead on it, and I was honored to do so. But I think every one of us remembers those days and times. And I think it's important that we always do. And if I could just say one real quick, Luke, I know you made a comment right at the beginning about the public support and a little bit about how times are tough. I know you didn't intend it to sound the way that I'm going to almost sound. I'm not trying to correct you. What I am saying is the majority of the public are absolutely behind this.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Agreed,
And I know
100%.
100%. I knew you were saying that.
Yep.
But the times have changed where the people who want to toss that shit out and they can get on their phones and sit in their basements and just besmirch people. And I've actually seen, and I've heard other actors talking about how, and I've had some significant arguments with some people that were friends and family members and say, well, yeah, but they kind of signed up for that. And the answer is no, we did not. Not one of us signed a line saying it's okay if I get murdered. I'm here to protect you, but I didn't sign up to get murdered ever. But the vast majority of the public, as we see, unfortunately, sometimes you only see it at times like that in the funerals, because people leave their lives as they should. Most people go untouched by crime and untouched by conflict with the police, and they're fully supportive. So,
absolutely clarify. I definitely agree with you. I think the majority of people, the silent majority, they weep, they hurt, just like officers do. They empathize with the role and support the police 100%. Unfortunately, society today has given that small minority the tools to amplify that stupidity, that shit. And that takes all too often the headlines, right? Because that's what the media wants. That's why I specifically said the media is the problem. I want to thank you for giving us your insights. I think it's important for people to understand that there is a human side to police officers. We all too often just see that 30-second clip on TV. They make their own presumptions. Yeah, well, they're tough guys. They'll deal with it. No, they're just as sensitive. They're just as emotionally vulnerable as anybody else. So I certainly appreciated some of your past experiences. Sure. I think it's very clear, just to sum up my point, is that death is not just about the officer, and it's not just about the police force, to be honest. It's about the community. It affects everything. It affects the persona of policing and the public trust across the country. So it's not something that we should be just trivialized. Its impact is felt throughout the organization and the community. I think it's important for people like us to bring some visibility to it and give people an opportunity to listen in and hear it from someone who lives it, unfortunately had to live it, and share some of his learnings with us.
I just want to add, when you talk about line of duty deaths, people often say, a construction worker's life or a carpenter's life is just as valuable as a police officer's life. Of course it is, but it's different. When a construction worker dies or a insurance broker gets hit by a car, and that is tragic, and there's a grief left behind. But an attack on a police officer or an emergency first responder is an attack on democracy. It's not an attack on that officer, it's an attack on our way of life. And that's what makes it unique, and that's what makes it special. People have to understand, if there weren't the police, there would be chaos.
I was just going to follow up on that, Brian. And you're 100% right. I don't ever question it. The family of a construction worker or the family of somebody working on the highways or a pilot or people that die, of course, they're humans first, right? Let's remember that. My point would be that we are one of very few professions that risk murder because of our job. Accidents, not negligence on a construction site, if you will, or a motor vehicle collision or those. We're talking about officers who die at the hands of a murder. And I think that's remarkably different. And then you top it with what you just said. The reason, like I say, I continue to use the line. The reason each of these officers we're talking about right now in this last recent past, the only reason they were where they were at the time was to get between evil and us. That's why they were there.
Well said.
They didn't just happen to be there. They went there to protect us. I don't mind telling you, I told you I've been to 40 funerals. I guarantee you that I'm not a big guy. Brian knows I'm not a big, tough guy. And I'm not ashamed to tell you, I have not been to one of those 40 funerals and not had tears roll down my face, right? Humans first. So,
Yeah. You know, at Mark's funeral, when his 14-year-old daughter talked, I thought I was just going to lose it. And I think the whole 10,000 people in that room were going to lose it.
They're a powerful event. If someone listening wants to attend one, it's unbelievable. The emotion, the power, it's something else. Jeff, just to say thank you again for joining us today. We appreciate you coming on, especially, you're up north trying to enjoy life and comes and bugs you.
all good.
But I'm good. I'm signing off. Brian, I'll leave it to you to say goodbye.
I can't thank you enough. I can't thank you for your 3,000 years of service, but I can't thank you enough for your insight and having a little bit of fun along the way. I thank you also for what you do with the Canada One Ride Foundation. You're retired, life's easy, and you're still giving back and supporting those that support us. So thank you, Jeff.
No, I appreciate it. And if anybody out there watches this and knows me, they'll know that I close all my emails the last 30 years and all my speaking engagements with my tagline, which is have a little fun every day. And it might sound hokey, but it's actually, this is a perfect time. I explain it to young recruits as well. Say, have a little fun every day. It might be one little snicker. You just got to have something to help balance the rest that we all have to go through. Huge thanks to all the frontliners that are out there, and hopefully somebody get to watch this. Thank you for your continued service. And thank you so much. Thanks for having me on, Luke. Pleasure. Brian, thanks again, buddy.
Our pleasure. And with that, folks, we'll see you next week for our next episode. Till then, take care and have a little
Bye,
fun.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Redacted Opinions. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed our podcast to help build our audience. Tune in next week for another episode of Redacted Opinions.